Well, there were several situations involved. There was another one in Capitol Forest, Porter Creek Campground. I got called by a Boy Scout troop. I was off duty again. Of course, I work graveyard. That's why I always get called on.
Working graveyard means?
Midnight to 8. Midnight to 8 in the morning, and that was my shift. And it was, so I'd always get called on these encounters during the day because that's usually when they occurred, when people would see something. Anyways, I got called to a Porter Creek Campground up in Capitol State Forest on Washington State. And a Boy Scout troop had been up there and was setting up camp and getting ready to take a hike up into the woods. And they had observed what they believed to be a creature lunging up, running up the trail that they were going to go up.
Until you experience what you believe is an animal attack, in our case, a bear attack, it's hard to put yourself in somebody else's shoes to realize the fear that's involved in believing that you're just about to get mauled and possibly killed by a wild beast.
But the bear could have easily caught you.
Oh, very easily. Yeah, you can't outrun a bear.
So would we call this an attack?
No, it wasn't an attack. I think what happened was that the bear wasn't expecting anybody in the area because all the humans by this time of day were gone. That's what the bear was used to. And we probably surprised the bear. It might have even been sleeping, but I think probably what happened was it had its head down. It was rooting around. We weren't making much noise. And then all of a sudden, we're walking close to it, probably actually frightened it. And when it took off running, it just took off to where it would normally go, and wasn't at that time. We didn't know it, but now I think that what happened was it was running up slope to get away from whatever it was hearing. Realized that what had frightened it was actually where the bear was running to, and so the bear diverted course and then ran down slope.
But he was making a lot of noise, kicking up stuff as he was running along, so he kept growing, in my mind, larger and larger. And we were on a trail that is not heavily traveled. It was the backside of the mountain, so it's real steep. It's when you say trail, it's more loose dirt and a little tiny cutout path in it.
It's wild out there, isn't it?
Wild, very wild, yeah.
And it had been moving up that trail for quite a ways until they lost sight of it in the heavy timber. Well, I went up and looked, and sure enough, there had been disturbances down around the creek, in the Porter Creek, just out on the edge of the campground. And this was fairly early in the season, so the campground wasn't frequented all that often at that time. When I looked, I noticed that there were some scrapings on a tree, that
claw marks, you mean?
It looked like claw marks, and they had started, separated, but when the further down the tree they went, the closer they came together. Kind of indicative of something just clawing the tree or scraping off the moss, the lichen on the tree.
And bears don't.
That was too high for a bear. It had been too high for a bear. It was up high. It was I could barely reach it with my hand, and so it was pretty high. And I'm 6 foot. And then there's a big old, I want to say maple tree. There's a huge branch that came off of it. If you know anything about maples up here, they got these real big secondary branches that they're all over that come off of them. And it's a broadleaf or big leaf maple. And they tend to get ferns, licorice ferns and stuff like that grow on the top of these limbs in the lichen that gather on the limbs. And I noticed that those ferns had been removed. A patch of that lichen had been removed from up on the tree itself. Anyways, closer review of that suggested that something had reached up there and grabbed that stuff. And looking down on the ground, I saw where the ferns had been compressed together, and it looked like the roots had been gnawed off by something. It's like, and that's routine for some creature to get out there or even humans when they're in a survival mode. They'll eat the roots of the brush around here because it's very rarely is it poisonous. You just got to know what you're looking for. And this was probably one of the delicacies of the forest. Licorice fern is a good fern. especially a young one like that. And the roots were good. They're good for you. So whatever ate that, or whatever did that, ate, I think, the roots. I gathered those up. There was a sheen on them, kind of like a slug or something crawled across them that I thought could be saliva or something like that. So and this is before we had DNA testing. So I gathered it up, threw it into a bag, paper bag, and labeled the bag along with the other stuff that I found there. I think I found hair there too. I did not get any tracks there because the soil was not consistent with casting.
You couldn't make a cast out of...
Yeah, it was something along the lines of a road. You know, that it was real compressed in that area. Further up the trail, I probably could have casted, but I didn't. I didn't take my material with me when I started following the tracks out. Anyways, to end that portion of it, I submitted the licorice ferns and the lichen and the other stuff that I collected to a scientist from the Washington State University, and sent him some casts as well to look at from the Porter Creek, or from the Abbott Hill, and from another site we had, South Elma, the High C Road site. So I started following those tracks up, and it went up the hill. The gate between the steps, the distance between lessened to about 7 feet to 6 feet, to just depending. The animal was not. It was not after it left the Boy Scouts. There were scuffs. There 9 to 10 feet in between the scuff marks of the down by where the Boy Scouts were, to anywhere from 3 to 6 to the it varied. So it appeared to me that the critter was not all as anxious to get out of there as it was when it saw the kids. Okay, I tracked that for a considerable distance, and
What's that mean?
oh gosh, up slope through, it broke out into another clear cut, hot summer or hot day. I would say probably 2 miles as far as the track went, maybe more. We didn't have any water. I had another guy with me. Didn't have any water with us, other than we didn't have any water with us at that point. And we went back down to, at one point I finally just said, look, we could follow this thing all the way out. Capitol State Forest goes forever in some areas out there, pretty rugged in certain areas. And this was heading towards the what we call the Hell's Drainage, or Hills Canyon area up in there. So we just said, we're just going to stay out of that. It's all Devil's Club and mud slope. And
What's Devil's Club?
Basically.
Oh, that's the mountain cactus.
yeah, it's horrible.
Okay.
And it grows to 12 foot tall.
Did you become less afraid of finding this creature as you continued tracking it?
Oh, I'll track it tomorrow if somebody comes up with the track. I don't believe the critter's wanting to do anything. I think the critter's just trying to survive, just like anybody else.
But you carried a weapon.
When we're in the woods, sometimes a warning shot at an animal or critter will scare it away
And save its life.
and save its life. Yes,
Because then you don't have to defend yourself
Correct.
against it.
That's
So,
correct.
did you ever think that you might have to shoot this creature?
no.
The fact is that when people hear stories like this, some people worry a whole lot. It's one more reason, like the coyotes that are coming up closer to the to neighborhoods. People are saying, there's just one more thing that I don't want to eat my kids.
Well, no. I think it's the opposite. I think that I'd be more concerned about the coyotes coming up into the neighborhoods and the black bears that are wandering around out there in the woods, and the kid getting between mom and cub, or the cougars that are stalking people, openly stalking people nowadays, than I would a Sasquatch that is just trying to avoid, or Bigfoot, or whatever you want to call it, that is trying to avoid detection. And even then, we're not positive that it exists.
But let me ask you something.
Sure.
Are we talking about a monster? Do people normally talk this about Bigfoot in a way that you respect? This is very different how you're talking about it.
Yeah, I grew up with nature. I think it's just part of nature. As far as a monster goes, they're sensationalizing. That's it's to sell a book or sell a film or something like that, or picture. And at the same time, define monster. I've been called a monster before, so define monster. First of all, you're going to have to convince me they don't exist now, because I've seen too much to believe that they do.
So that's where we're at.
Correct.
The question is not, does it exist? You've done the work of an expert.
it was Abbott Hill Track. I sent those hairs to a forensic pathologist down in, I want to say it's Arizona State University. And I asked him, I sent them along with some samples, control hairs, that I plucked out of one of the deputies' mustache and while he's standing there, and dropped them into an envelope. So I sent them down there, and both of them were unlabeled. And I asked him to compare and give me an example. Just give me a critique them, review them, do his experiments on them, do whatever he's going to do, and identify what those hairs were from. The deputy is a Hispanic male, and he had a mustache. We went all the way down the list and identified the guy. Hispanic male, recently trimmed mustache. Facial. He said facial. So I don't know how he got all that, but he did. But the other one, he couldn't identify. He couldn't identify it with anything on the list.